Welcome to my review for Siren, which came out in 2016. This might seem like a bit of a random pick for me in terms of which reviews I do, but it's not. This is actually part of my ongoing VHS franchise review series. Siren is a spin-off of a story which was included on the original VHS film, a story called Amateur Night. So in that short, they were a group of guys who were on a night out and they met a couple of women actually, took them back to their hotel room. But it turns out that one of these women is actually a succubus. I got that word from Wikipedia, so don't blame me if it's not entirely accurate. And all hell breaks loose once the guys realise that this woman is not human, and deaths occur, and eventually the succubus sprouts wings and flies off with the one guy amongst the group who she actually likes. So this spin-off is sort of like a feature-length version of that concept. It's not a remake. This film is not a retelling of that original story, but stretched out into 90 minutes. Things are slightly different this time. So we get a group of guys on a night out again, but this time it's a stag do. They're not visiting nightclubs, they're visiting strip clubs. So they go to this one particular dive, which is a little bit more hush-hush than the others, and it looks a bit weirder once they get inside the place. And it turns out that Lily the succubus, yeah, we find out her name this time around, she's being held captive in a room naked, and the idea is that guys who pay to get into this place, as well as sitting in the main bar area and enjoying some other women who are dancing on stage, they can also look into this little room and just have a little look at Lily for a couple of minutes, get their rocks off and be on their way back to the bar area or whatever. Now, one of the guys amongst the stag group, he feels sorry for Lily, so when no one's looking, he lets her out because he starts to suspect that she's there against her will. He doesn't know that she's a dangerous creature. So the main horror of the movie sort of begins at this point. Lily is going after these guys for the rest of the film, and this is not the only thing they've got to contend with, because the gangsters who are sort of in charge of Lily and this entire club, they're not too happy about the fact that their prized possession has been let loose, so they are a big threat as well. So there's a lot more going on this time in order to sort of pad the movie out for 90 minutes. There are some other subtle things this time to do with the Lily character that we didn't have the first time around. So she has a tail this time that I didn't notice in the original short. She sort of swishes it around like a xenomorph or something. And I'm guessing that the title of the movie, Siren, is a reference to the old mythological idea of mermaids on a rock luring sailors to their deaths with their sweet singing. Because Lily does this thing in this film where she sort of goes, la 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 la, and men are just completely entranced. It's that kind of deal. It was directed by Greg Bishop, who didn't direct the original short, but he has directed another short from within the VHS franchise. He did the story Dante the Great from VHS Viral, a story I just happen to really like. That's his pedigree. I'll say at this point that I don't really like this film. I can't say I was that enthusiastic anyway about getting a spin-off to Amateur Night. The only reason I watch this at all is just to be a completionist in terms of my review series, you know, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, etc. But I've never really wanted a Lily the Succubus spin-off, which is going to make my next comment sound a little bit weird, because I've only got one positive for this movie, and it actually is Lily the Succubus. I do like the character, and I like the add-ons that they've given her in this, like the ability to entrance men with her humming or singing, whatever she does. To my surprise, she's actually played by the same actress in this who was in the original short. I didn't expect that. I thought that they would recast her. Because if you compare Siren to the film Terrifier, that wasn't Art the Clown's first rodeo. He first turned up in a short story which was included in the All Hallows Eve collection. And I think once they got to Terrifier, they replaced the actor. And I thought that they would do the same with Siren for some reason, but no, it's still Hannah Fearman, and full credit to her, because she pretty much spends this entire movie naked around male actors, and she gets down and does it. It can't have been an easy role, but she did pretty well with it. Everything else I've got to say about this movie, though, apart from Lily, is mostly negative. I don't like the story at all. I mean, the main gangster in this, how he manages to entrap Lily in the first place is by using some kind of magic bracelet with runes on it. So in the very first scene, he's in a church with a child version of Lily, and he slaps this giant ring thing on her ankle, and that's it. She's now permanently bound to him. She has to follow his willpower for as long as the bracelet remains on her ankle. But where did this bracelet come from? How did he know that this would work on this creature? There's so many questions, and it's just bullshit. You know, it's like something you'd write down on the page the first day of trying to write the movie, and then quickly abandon it in favour of something else. And I don't like the strip club where Lily's being held captive. It's just so obviously a dodgy place when the stag do guys turn up there. If you compare this film to a film I watched a few months ago called The Houses of Halloween, or in America it was called The Houses That October Built, these guys were going around these extreme haunted houses, but every one they went to was just slightly dodgier than the last. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, is this the place finally where we get to the horror part of the movie? And then it wasn't. The tension was ratcheted up a little bit longer, and then they went on to the next place. You don't get that here. Once the characters get to the second strip club, which turns out to be the really dodgy one where Lily's being held captive, it's so obviously the sleaziest, nastiest place you've ever seen, even before we see Lily. I mean, what really amused me about these guys on the stag do, the first club they go to, they don't really like it because the women on stage are not particularly good looking. So this guy comes up to them. He's like the guy from Hostel who says to the characters, "Oh, you've got to come to Slovakia. The women are like amazing. They're so much better than here." We get a similar sort of deal here. This guy says, "Oh, you've got to come to this other strip club. The women are just, oh, I mean, if you can handle it, guys, you know." And of course, they get tempted and they go to this second place. But you can tell from the very first minute that this place is the dodgiest place in the world and that these guys should just turn on their heels and run. So there's just no tension whatsoever. And the women on stage are no better looking than the women from the first strip club, yet the stag do guys pretend that they are. That there's this, at one point, the dancer woman goes off and this other woman comes on with a guy and he just starts belting her like it's some weird S&M show. And it looks like she's actually being hurt for real, but the guys just stand there anyway, kind of like, oh, well, I'm sure it'll get better. And there's a woman behind the bar who's got like a pot of leeches or something, and you can have a leech in your drink if you want. And one of the guys who, up until this point of the story, has just been a complete nerd, a shy nerd, he gets one of these drinks with a leech in it, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to drink this. But it's got a leech in it, a live leech. He just downs it. And then a few minutes later, he acts all agitated when he realises that he's getting ill from this thing, and it's made him feel all queasy. He's like, what did you do to me? And I'm like, seriously? You just drank an alcoholic drink with a leech in it. What did you expect? But he wasn't even, like, drunk at this point. He just decided to do this really stupid thing. It's like, I don't know. The protagonists in general, I didn't really like in this. There's one of them who's all right. He's like the life and soul of the party. He's the one who's always saying things like, we're going to have such a good time tonight. We're going to say yes to everything. We're going to party like it's 1999. I liked him, but his three buddies are just the biggest wet drips you've ever seen in your life. They are so boring, and it's particularly galling that the main character of the movie would be like this, because the main protagonist in any horror film has got to sort of carry the film forwards to some degree, but this guy doesn't. He's just a complete dullard. At one point, he lambasts one of his friends as well for getting him into this mess, and it's just not a fair complaint to make on his behalf at all. That just made me like his character even less. The main gangster, they've tried to make him all kooky and full of personality, but it's just not written very well. And there's a really weird scene where this guy says to the four protagonists, okay, lads, you don't have to pay tonight as long as you give me one memory about your mother. And these guys are obviously thinking that this is really weird, but they go along with it anyway. So then the gangster says, right, look down at your feet. So they do, and then a couple of moments later, the gangster says, right, that's it, you've paid. I'm thinking, hang on, what about the memory of the mother? It's a really bizarre scene that makes no sense whatsoever. There's also an annoying trope in this film where the characters get away, they bump into a couple of cops, but of course these cops they're on the payroll of the gangster, of course they are. And I'm getting sick and tired of seeing this in movies. It seems to have happened in so many horror films now. At the end, we get a scene which I thought was quite sweet, and then it's ruined with a sting in the tail climax that's yet to come. So there's a nice moment between Lily and the main character, because Lily sort of comes to the realisation that this guy doesn't actually fancy her back, but rather than force him to be with her, she probably could do, given her strength. No, she walks away, she kisses him and walks away, and it's a nice moment for Lily. I could see that she could be capable of coming to that realisation, and it's one of the very, very few scenes I liked in the movie, but then they ruin it with this extra bit at the end where the guy is back home with his fiancée and Lily decides to come back for him after all. It just renders the scene before that completely pointless. So yeah, you get basically the same ending that you get at the end of the original short, with Lily flying off with a guy that she just can't resist forcing to be with her, but it doesn't work at all. It's really bad. I have nothing more to say about this one, guys, so let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this movie. There is just one bloody axe in the bag. That is not a very good score at all. I don't like this. I shall certainly never be watching it again. This film has really dampened my enthusiasm for the prospect of any further spin-offs from VHS stories. I mean, I love the VHS movies, but I just don't think we should be making full-length features out of those stories. I think, for the most part, they all work great as short stories, and when you try and expand them into something else, yeah, not for me. I mean, with the Terrifier Art the Clown thing, that sort of worked. I don't think Terrifier is a great movie, but it's all right. But for me, this is a failure, 1 out of 5. And that completes my VHS franchise review series. I've covered all 4 main VHS films and the one spin-off. So all that remains to do now is for me to come back and do my series rankings video, and I bet you can have a good guess at what film is going to come bottom of the pile. So until then, cheerio, bye-bye.